Episode 241, The Social Media Explosion. When Jade woke up the next morning, she immediately touched the spot on the bed next to her where Dario had been sleeping and found that it was already cold. Surprised, she got up and walked into the living room to check for him, but the person sitting on the sofa was not her husband, but her agent. "Caroline, what are you doing here?" she exclaimed. Luckily, she'd put something on after getting out of bed, but that something consisted of sexy lingerie. Jade blushed when she saw Caroline take in her attire. "I'm sorry, I'll go get changed," she yelped and fled back into the bedroom. "I'll wait," she heard Caroline say in a tone that hinted at amusement. Jade changed into a dress as fast as possible, and when she returned to the living room, Caroline pointed to the kitchen and said, "You should eat first." Jade smiled when she realized that Dario had prepared breakfast for her before he left, and he had even left a note. "He's already gone back to New York," she exclaimed. The note went on to say that he would come back as soon as possible, and that she was to think of him at least 100 times a day while he was gone. The last sentence made her smile even more. "He really knows how to lift my spirits," she thought. Because there was plenty of food, Jade invited Caroline to have breakfast with her. Although she had already eaten, Caroline didn't want to be rude, so she accepted Jade's offer. After the first few bites, she was glad she had. The meal prepared by Dario was so delicious, it shocked her. Who would have guessed that this important guy is such a great cook? She thought in disbelief. He came across as so cold and impersonal, but he obviously has a gentle side to him. Even though she prided herself on her self-control, she couldn't help but finish the delicious breakfast. "He's made a restaurant-quality meal out of some very ordinary ingredients," she commented. "He treats you really well." Jade smiled and responded, "Yes, he does. He's a great husband." "I really hope that you both can continue like this." Caroline muttered so softly that Jade could barely hear her. "What did you just say?" she asked curiously. "Oh, nothing," Caroline replied quickly. After breakfast, Caroline helped her wash the dishes, which embarrassed Jade. "She's my agent. She shouldn't be doing the dishes," she thought, feeling uncomfortable. But then she realized how lucky she was. "There are so many people around me that treat me so well," she thought, smiling. "By the way, have you looked at Instagram yet?" Caroline suddenly asked. Jade looked at her blankly for a second and then said, "No, not yet. Why?" "Hurry up and look," Caroline instructed her. Jade did as she was told, swiping her phone and clicking on the app. As soon as her Instagram feed opened, she understood why Caroline had wanted her to look. Her jaw dropped when she took in the number of followers. Yesterday, there had been a few hundred, but today, there were over 100,000. "This is unbelievable," she shouted as she took in the numbers. There were also tens of thousands of comments and innumerable private messages from her fans. "Caroline, how did this happen?" she asked incredulously. "I haven't posted anything here in days." She looked at the picture that had garnered all the attention and realized it was the one of her in the beautiful dress that she had sent to Dario the previous night. Did he post this? She wondered, shaking her head. But he doesn't have the password to my account. Then she realized that he had probably guessed her password, which was their wedding anniversary. "I guess I better change that," she thought, feeling slightly annoyed at his intrusion. Most of the comments were positive, praising her appearance. "Are you an angel that fell from heaven?" one of them read. "You are an advertising goddess," said another. "The dress with you in it sets a new standard for beauty," read a third. There were many more comments along the same lines, and Jade was stunned. All her life she had been insecure, lacking confidence. Never before had she been praised by so many people. "I could get used to this," she thought with a sheepish grin. But then she was interrupted by a caller ID flashing up on her screen. It was Violet. As soon as she answered, Violet shouted in her ear, "You're a big star, Jade, and you still have time to answer my call. I'm touched." "Violet, you're exaggerating as usual," Jade replied, feeling a bit self-conscious. "I'm totally not," she insisted. Episode 242, The Trending Headline. After the call, Jade immediately opened her Facebook page. She hadn't been on in quite a while, and the first thing she saw in her feed was the Instagram photo. She rubbed her eyes in disbelief. There were other pictures of her in the golden dress and a link to a longer story. "I can't believe this," she exclaimed. A bunch of the major news sites have picked up this story and it's trending. Yes, now people don't need to see your shampoo commercial anymore before they recognize you, Caroline responded with a smile. Most of the articles talked about her shooting the Adele Barracu commercial and the dress she was wearing. Someone had figured out the price of the garment, and Jade gasped when she realized how expensive it was. I didn't know those colored diamonds on the bodice were real, she said, her voice trembling. One of the articles mentioned that each diamond had been sourced from a different part of the world and bought by a mysterious collector just over a month ago. Even a single colored diamond was out of reach for all but the richest, let alone the 8 that were adorning her dress. The material was unique as well, having been custom-made by a world-class artisan. The silk threads were spun with actual strands of gold, giving the garment its unique sparkle. Jade shook her head, trying to clear her mind. She had just remembered that the dress didn't come from Adele Barracu directly, but from a subsidiary company, and that the stylist had said it belonged to her right from the start. Why do I get the feeling that this all has to do something with Dario? She thought, grimacing. Some of the headlines were quite exaggerated, citing her as a rare beauty who only appeared once in 1,000 years, or as the new spokesperson for Adele Barracu. Jade laughed at one particularly over-the-top title that called her the advertising goddess descending to the mortal world to shoot a new commercial. That's a little too much, she said to Caroline, but now she understood why Violet had been so excited. I can't believe I've become a headliner in a single night just because I wore a dress that's more expensive than the ones worn by real stars, she muttered, trying to hide how pleased she was with all the attention. Well, Adele Barracu doesn't generally ask a newcomer to be their spokesperson, Caroline remarked. So people are expecting you to become the next international superstar. And you need to realize that it's not just the dress, but you who is making headlines. You are an exceptional beauty in any dress. Overnight, Jade had become the latest social media trend. People wanted to follow her and hear what she had to say. She'd only recently gotten a Twitter account and had only tweeted a couple of times since, but now her tweets were already trending. It almost made her cry. I don't even really know how to use Twitter when I wrote that stuff, she thought, feeling a bit shaken. And now there are all these people retweeting it. If I'd known, I would have said something more meaningful. She looked at some more posts. The photos taken during the filming of the commercial were a bit fuzzy, as if they'd been taken in haste, but the dazzling dress was easily recognizable. Many of the comments mentioned Jade's fresh look and how different it was from the cosmetically enhanced faces of other celebrities. By that evening, she'd almost as many followers as most of the big stars. I should be mad at Dario for hacking into my social media accounts, she thought, but he really has done me a pretty big favor. Although there are still a few things that don't make sense. When she'd been filming the commercial, Caroline had been watching, so she couldn't figure out how someone had managed to sneak on the set to take those photos. I guess it really doesn't matter who it was because it has resulted in a lot of positive press for me, but I'm still curious, she thought with a frown. And then there is Dario rushing off to New York in the middle of the night. What was all that about? Is there someone special he went to see whom I don't know about? She realized she'd been staring blankly at her Facebook feed when a message from Violet interrupted her train of thought. Jade, did you see all the articles about you and the dress? You've become famous overnight. Everyone is talking about you and that ad for Adele Barracu. You're basically the talk of the town. Oh, stop exaggerating, Violet, Jade admonished her, typing quickly. I'm just famous by association with the brand, and I'm sure people will forget about me in a matter of days. She couldn't help but smile, nevertheless. I'm so glad Mrs. Foster was kind enough to give me that amazing dress, not to mention the opportunity to do the commercial. Without that, I would not be here today, she thought. Episode 243. The New Assistant. Don't be so modest, Violet messaged back. There is a reason you got to do that commercial and were given the dress. Everyone likes your natural look and your beautiful face. You could dress in a bag and still look great. Jade laughed when she read Violet's last comment. Okay, you're right, she typed, smiling. I'm not going to argue. She was actually quite grateful to Violet for helping her and always having her back. She's a good friend, she thought. As if on cue, her phone rang. I got tired of typing, Violet said when Jade answered. And I wanted to ask if you had given any thought to my suggestion. You mean about becoming my assistant? Jade replied. Yes, exactly, Violet confirmed. Now that you're famous, you'll need an assistant because you'll be insanely busy all the time. She really wanted the position. There's no future in acting for me, she thought, so I might as well take advantage of Jade's success. I haven't had a chance to talk to Caroline about this yet, Jade said, feeling a bit uncomfortable. How can I let my friend be my assistant, she thought. That would be totally inappropriate. I'd rather hire a total stranger. Well, go talk to her now and call me back, Violet urged. Jade hung up and looked at Caroline, debating what to do next. She knew that Caroline had probably overheard at least part of the conversation, so it was a good time to broach the subject. Nervously, she said, I need to talk to you about something. Yes, I heard. Your friend wants to be your assistant, Caroline replied, looking at her intently. Tell her to come and talk to me in person, and we'll take it from there. Really? Jade was surprised. She'd expected Caroline to reject the idea outright. Yes, you'll need an assistant sooner or later, so I may as well see if she's suitable for the job. Jade immediately called Violet back to tell her the good news. When can I come by? She replied. As soon as you can, Jade told her. Within half an hour, Violet was at the front door. She was impressed by the size of the house. With the recent jump in property prices, this place must be worth a fortune, she thought. It made her even more nervous, but she told herself to be calm. After Jade let her in, she introduced her to Caroline, whom she greeted politely. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. I've heard a lot about you from Jade, she said. That's Miss Winslet to you if you want to be my assistant, Jade joked. But she was concerned. If she becomes my assistant, will it affect our relationship? She's my only close friend, she thought. What? I won't be able to call you by your first name? Violet exclaimed. That won't do. Then you better not apply for the job, Jade quipped. Caroline watched their exchange with an unreadable expression and then asked, What's your last name, Violet? Violet started, realizing she had lost her composure. I'm sorry, we shouldn't be joking around like this. My last name is Wilson. She'd expected Caroline to ask her some questions, but instead, Caroline said, You'll be on probation for 3 months, and during that time, you'll be on a training salary of $2,500 per month. I expect you to be available to assist Jade around the clock. Is that clear? Violet was floored. She's hiring me, she thought, not believing her ears. And $2,500? That's way more than I make playing background characters on set. Wow, thank you, Caroline, she said, looking enthusiastic. I'll work super hard for this position, I promise. It is a trial, okay? Caroline replied curtly. If I'm not satisfied with your work, I'll replace you in a split second. Of course, I understand completely. I won't let you down, Violet promised. She felt apprehensive but also excited. I know I've got this, she thought. Noticing Violet's nervous look, Jade remembered her first meeting with Caroline. I thought she was intimidating too, she recalled. And I still do sometimes. She pulled her aside and whispered, Don't let her scare you. She's actually really great. I owe a lot of what I have now to her efforts. And while she may come across as really cold, she has a good heart. She'd learned these things about Caroline over the last month of working with her. I'll never forget how she helped me deal with Amelia Stevens, she thought. She's not only a great agent, but an all-round good person. Okay, Jade, we need to get moving, Caroline told her and added, Can you pack up your things, please? Violet can help you, and then she should come along. Jade nodded and headed for her room, followed by Violet. I haven't even had time to unpack, she thought as she opened her suitcase. It won't take long to repack. But when she looked into her case, she saw that it was empty except for one thing, a box of tampons. Episode 244, Playing in the Big Leagues. Jade did a double take. What the heck? She thought, and then she chuckled. I guess this is Dario's idea of a joke. She closed the lid before Violet could see inside the suitcase. Oh good, you're done packing. Let's go then, Violet said. Yes, it appears my husband took care of the packing for me, Jade replied calmly. Your what? Violet stared at her in disbelief. Did you just say husband? When on earth did you get married? Why didn't you tell me? Her voice had risen an octave. Jade laughed and said, Calm down, I'll tell you everything, but you have to promise to keep it a secret. Nobody else knows about this, but since you're my assistant now, I'm not going to keep you in the dark. Violet patted the left side of her chest and replied, Cross my heart and hope to die. I won't tell a soul. Now, what's the deal? Who's your husband? Before Jade had a chance to respond, Caroline walked into the room and said, Violet, there are some questions that shouldn't be asked, and this is one of them. We are also running late, so we'll need to leave immediately. She rushed them out of the house and into the car that would take them to the set of Decadent Lady, which was being filmed in a small mountain village. Jade was reluctant to leave the nice house, and she was missing Dario, but there was nothing she could do about it. She got in the car and they departed. It took a couple of hours to get to the village, and by the time they arrived, it was already afternoon. After a quick lunch, Jade threw herself into the filming, trying to wrap things up as quickly as possible. The faster I get done here, the faster I can see Dario again, she thought impatiently, not realizing that her husband was in the middle of a dangerous situation at that very moment. In the middle of nowhere, a black SUV with bulletproof windows was parked outside a derelict factory, surrounded by dozens of military-style vehicles. Dario and David were sitting in the back seat of the SUV, while Lucas was in the driver's seat. He was holding a detailed floor plan of the abandoned factory and explaining the layout to Dario. Based on our intelligence, Miss Gray should be locked up inside here, he said. But we don't know her exact location. I sent 2 of my guys in this morning, but they haven't come out yet. He frowned and continued. I suspect something has happened to them. Dario shot him a dark look and asked, So what's the plan now? Well, we can't just barge in, Lucas replied. That would put Mimi at risk. We need to get them to come to us, David suggested. And I think I have a way to make that happen. He took a megaphone out of a bag and opened a window. Hey, you losers, are you going to come out? Or do we need to come in? Or maybe you don't have the guts to face us. Come on, prove me wrong. Dario and Lucas looked at each other in surprise. You're not actually expecting that to work, are you? Lucas asked David disdainfully. We'll see, David replied. They were surprised when the massive gate swung open and a group of men walked out, dressed in black and holding weapons. Behind them, 2 people were ejected, tossed out like they were dirty rags. It was immediately obvious that they were badly injured. Lucas's face darkened. Their appearance was almost beyond recognition, but he knew them by their clothes. These are the 2 men I sent in yesterday, he said hoarsely. They took in the arsenal of weapons the guards were holding, which consisted of assault rifles and rocket launchers. They mean business, Dario said. We shouldn't antagonize them any further. But David ignored him and shouted, Is that the best you've got, you cowards? We don't want to talk to your peons. How about you send out the big boss, and then we can discuss business? Will you shut up already? Lucas snapped. We don't stand a chance in a fight against them. What are you talking about? I have no intention of fighting them, David replied condescendingly. That's what you're for. Aren't you the retired Special Forces soldier? Dario's face contorted with anger at David's flippant attitude, but before he had a chance to speak, a loud noise above them distracted him. They looked up and saw a fighter jet in the process of landing. Damn, these guys are playing in the big leagues, Lucas exclaimed. Turning toward Dario, he added, Mr. Foster, how did you get on the wrong side of a terrorist organization? David had turned pale at the sight of the jet and looked like he was ready to bolt. I don't think I want to be a part of this anymore, he said weakly. It's too late for that, Dario barked. Let's go. With those words, he opened the door and stepped out. Lucas followed, but David stayed put. He was staring up at the plane. We're going to walk out in front of them just like that? He asked, looking scared. Do we even have bulletproof vests? I'm not going anywhere, seeing how I don't particularly want to die here. He looked around in panic as the fighter jet landed. The doors opened, and 2 people emerged, a man and a woman. The woman was very thin and looked scared. Her hands were tied with a coarse-looking rope, and a cloth had been stuffed into her mouth. Even though her hair was messy and her clothes dirty, it was still obvious that she was very beautiful. Episode 245. A Challenge. Before anyone could react, the man unceremoniously pushed the woman to the ground and she banged her face. David stepped forward, spat in disgust and shouted, You bastard! What kind of man treats a woman like that? If you have the guts, he continued, come at me. I'll teach you a lesson in manners. Lucas looked at the woman lying on the ground and frowned. Her eyes were full of fear and her body was shaking. She'd clearly suffered a lot. "Dario, look at her carefully. Is she the person you're looking for?" Lucas asked in an urgent voice. David walked forward and squatted down next to her. "Miss, is your name Mimi?" he asked. Miranda was stunned for a moment. Mimi was her nickname and not many people knew it. She glanced up at the man, but she didn't recognize him. Who is he? She thought. So much had happened to her in one night. After asking Jade for an autograph, Miranda had gone straight home, but on the way, a black van had pulled up next to her and someone had gotten out and knocked her unconscious. She had woken up in an unfamiliar place, disoriented, her hands tied behind her back and with a foul-tasting cloth stuffed in her mouth that prevented her from speaking. "Well, do you think it's her?" David asked again. "We need to know if it's the right woman if we're going to save her. Think back to 5 years ago. Is she the one who saw you naked?" Dario looked at his friend coldly, and David took a step back, wondering if he had gone too far. "What nonsense are you talking about, David?" Dario asked disdainfully. While they were arguing, a man walked down from the jet with an AK-47 assault rifle held nonchalantly in one hand. There was a deep scar running across his face. His body was heavily muscled, and he had the air of someone in charge. He walked over with an arrogant expression, and his gaze swept over the 3 people in front of him. Then, his eyes rested on Dario, and he grinned nastily. "Dario Foster, I'm so glad you came. It seems this woman is important to you," he said. As the scarred man spoke, he kicked the woman, making her grunt in pain and roll into a ball. There were tears in her eyes and an expression of fear and agony on her face, but with the cloth in her mouth, she couldn't speak or cry out. Dario looked down at Miranda and felt pity for her. "Since we found her, hurry up and do something to help her," he said, his eyes sharp and predatory. David took a step closer to the scarred man and roared, "Hey, Scarface, Dario has plenty of money if that's what you're after. So hurry up and let her go. If you wait for us to act, you won't get a cent." The man looked at David with disdain, as if he was little more than a nuisance that was standing in his way. He raised his rifle, aimed it at Dario's head and sneered, "Come and fight me 1-on-1. If you win, I'll let the bitch go. If you lose, you'll have to kneel down in front of me and beg for mercy," he said, with a maniacal laugh. "I almost feel sorry for him," David thought. "Most people who speak to Dario like that end up dead." "Lucas, I think this guy is mad," David observed. "Well, are you too scared to face me?" the scarred man asked tauntingly. "I'll take you up on that challenge," David shouted. The scarred man ignored David and shouted again at Dario. "You have 2 choices. Either come and fight me or say goodbye to this woman forever." As he spoke, he pointed the rifle at Miranda's stomach and jabbed her with it. She felt the coldness of the muzzle and looked at the weapon in fear and despair. She shook violently and tried to scream, but the cloth in her mouth prevented her from doing so, and only a piteous muffled sound came out. "No!" shouted David. "Don't! Damn it, I can't bear it anymore!" He opened the trunk of the car and took out 2 assault rifles. He threw one to Lucas and took the other for himself. His movements were quick and smooth. He raised his own rifle to his shoulder and let out a burst aimed at the scarred man. The man ran for cover while Miranda flattened herself on the ground in an attempt to evade the storm of bullets. To Miranda, it was like a scene from a movie or a nightmare. Episode 246. Flashback from 5 years ago. Is this just a bad dream? Miranda wondered. She felt like her grip on reality was slipping away from her. The scarred man's 2 henchmen responded quickly, raised their own assault rifles, and returned fire. They were both wearing bulletproof vests and protected the scarred man with their bodies as they fired. Dario narrowed his eyes and took a step back. The hired shooters who'd been hiding outside the factory rushed out with their weapons and formed a wall in front of Dario to protect him. There were 2 rows of armed men, each firing a hail of bullets at the other, while both the scarred man and Dario were protected behind the lines of shooters. The scarred man pulled the cloth out of Miranda's mouth and smiled luridly at her in appreciation of her pretty face. "No wonder you've been looking for her for 5 years, Dario," he shouted above the gunfire. "She's not bad looking at all. Why don't me and my friend show her how much we appreciate A nice-looking woman. How did he know that we've been looking for her for 5 years? Lucas said, looking over at David. We were so careful to look into things quietly. How did they find out? Lucas wondered. They must have been involved in what happened 5 years ago, he thought. The scarred man called 2 of his people and pressed Miranda firmly to the ground. The gunfire stopped from both sides. He pulled out a large knife from his belt and cut through Miranda's clothes, revealing her body. Miranda struggled in his grip, but her hands were bound, and he was much too strong for her. Please, no, will someone save me? She screamed, her voice hoarse with despair. Through the gap between her tormentors, she looked at Dario and David. They called me Mimi, so they must know me, she thought. Maybe they will save me. They're my only hope. Watching Miranda in such distress and feeling so helpless frustrated David, and he shouted in fury, Damn you, you're no better than animals. Please, let me go, Miranda cried. The scarred man smiled. The more she cries, the more likely Dario will do what I want him to, he thought. Dario was moved by her pleas. Her voice sounded familiar. The woman who had risked her life to save him needed his help. Memories from 5 years before came flooding back to him. 5 years ago. Her voice was as sweet as a bell. She was like an angel who had appeared beside him when he needed help. Hey, wake up! You're bleeding badly, she said in a melodic voice. She looked at him in horror, but she chose to help him rather than to think of herself and flee. Let's go. We need to get out of here, she said. She had sensed that something was wrong, and she was risking her own safety to help a stranger. Is someone chasing you? She asked. The girl removed Dario's clothes decisively and covered his naked body in leaves and weeds so that he would not be found. He was barely conscious, but he reached out and grabbed her slender wrist. What do you want? He asked weakly. Lie here quietly, she answered. When I put on your clothes, they'll think that I'm you, and they'll follow me instead. His mind went blank then. He didn't understand why this woman, whom he had never seen before, would risk her life to help him. No, absolutely not. They'll kill you, he replied, in an attempt to stop her. But his strength failed him, and he wasn't able to dissuade her from carrying out her plan. I won't die, she replied. You're the one they're looking for, not me. I'll be fine. Don't worry. Dario gritted his teeth, his muscles relaxed, and he asked one last question. What's your name? Call me Mimi, she replied. Although his mind was fuzzy, he later remembered that name. He heard the sound of gunshots and screams as he lost consciousness. For the past 5 years, Dario has been searching for the mysterious girl who had saved his life. Bringing his mind back to the present, his eyes filled with deadly intent. He pulled David back to the car and told him to get in. David looked at him in surprise. You can't be thinking of running away, he said incredulously. Lucas looked over and saw what Dario was thinking. He ran over and jumped into the driver's seat. Drive straight at them, Dario commanded. The command was unnecessary. Lucas had worked closely with Dario for long enough to understand his thinking without explanation. He pushed the accelerator hard to the floor with a bloodthirsty smile on his face. The car sped toward the scarred man and his minions. Let's see how well your bulletproof vests do against this car, he said. The scarred man's hirelings fired at the vehicle, but it had been modified to withstand gunfire, and they scattered as the car approached, unimpeded. Episode 247. The Fear. Miranda watched helplessly as the car sped toward her. She closed her eyes in preparation for the inevitable collision and sudden death. There was noise and chaos all around her, but the impact never came. She opened her eyes, blinked them clear of tears, and looked around in confusion. The scarred man and his thugs had scattered, and the car had screeched to a stop just to one side of her. Lucas and David jumped out, while the remainder of their hired shooters formed up around the car. Dario opened the door and stepped out, picked up the now unconscious Miranda, and carried her back to the car. He looked at her with an uncharacteristic expression of sympathy. She had regained consciousness, and her eyes were filled with fear. She wanted to cry, but she had already cried to the point where no more tears would come. Dario untied her hands, took off his suit jacket, and placed it over her shoulders. Miranda gathered what was left of her clothing in her hands and covered her body as well as she could, embarrassed at feeling so exposed. Then she nestled against him for comfort and warmth and said, thank you, before fainting in his arms. Outside the armored car, Lucas and David were shooting at the gang of scattered gunmen. When they saw that Dario and Miranda were safe in the car, they stopped firing and climbed in. The shooters in charge of protecting them remained behind to cover their retreat. David looked at the unconscious Miranda and asked with a frown, "Dario, where are we going now?" "Where do you think?" Dario replied. Lucas, still in tune with Dario's thinking, drove as fast as he could to the nearest hospital. The scarred man and some of his minions, having been scattered by the car and still under fire from Dario's remaining men, scurried into the plane and took off. Meanwhile, after Dario's car left for the hospital, the police arrived at the abandoned factory and arrested the men who hadn't managed to escape. A short while later, the plane landed on the grounds of an old villa on the outskirts of town. The villa, situated on a large estate, was surrounded on all sides by trees and was not visible from any nearby roads, which suited its owner well. It was well guarded, with armed men posted at each entrance and cameras overlooking both the house and the grounds. Very little that happened there escaped the eyes of the owner. The scarred man got off the plane, and a man in black walked up to him and grabbed him by the arm. "You ought to come inside with me," he said gruffly. "Hey, get your hands off me," the scarred man shouted, angry at the insolence from someone who was his subordinate. Although his words were full of bravado, he felt a growing panic. The only way this guy would dare lay his hands on me is if he'd been ordered by the boss to bring me in, and that's not good, he thought grimly. "The boss wants to see you," the man in black said without expression. "So get moving." The scarred man stopped still and looked at him incredulously. The other man pulled out a pistol and pointed at him. "Move," he said coldly. They walked toward the villa and went up to a study on the second floor. It was an elaborately decorated room. Sitting behind the desk was a handsome young man with a cruel face. "Boss, I didn't expect you here today," the scarred man said, with fear etched into his features. The young man looked at him with no expression on his face for what seemed like a long time. He picked up his wineglass from the desk and drank slowly. He had an arrogant appearance, with a wild look in his eyes that seemed barely under control. The scarred man looked around the room and noticed that there were several other armed men watching him intently. The young boss was flanked by two men in suits who looked like his personal bodyguards. He knew one of them to be Kyle Simmons, the boss's right-hand man. The scarred man swallowed hard and stood still, not daring to move. The silence in the room felt oppressive, and he started to sweat. The young man stood up and walked slowly toward him. "Boss, please," the scarred man said loudly, all traces of bravado gone. The young man stood a few feet in front of him and finished his wine, looking into the scarred man's now terrified eyes. His own eyes were filled with anger and hostile intent. Without warning, he threw the empty glass at his terrified minion, and it smashed against his body. The sound of the glass shattering broke the tense atmosphere in the room, and the scarred man raised his arm and looked at the fresh cuts on his forearm. He knelt down in front of his master, sweating profusely, and begged, "Boss, please, I know that I was wrong. Forgive me." "You were very bold to act without my orders, Heath. Your actions have almost ruined my plans. Even if I cut off your head, it would be too merciful," he said in a quiet voice, barely more than a whisper. The atmosphere in the room was heavy with expectation, and Heath began to tremble in terror. "I didn't do it on purpose, boss. Please forgive me this once," he stuttered. As he spoke, he looked at the two men standing beside him. He wanted them to plead for his life, but they both remained silently indifferent. At a nod from the young man, Kyle stepped forward and kicked him in the chest. Heath fell backward and scrambled to return to his knees in front of his master. Episode 248. Consequences. "Has your brain rotted away inside that ugly skull of yours?" Kyle asked. "Because of your idiotic escapade, you exposed our position," he continued, sneering at the man on his knees. Kyle was well known in their gang as ruthless, capable, and loyal to the boss. He kicked Heath again in the chest, causing him to cough and splutter as he scrambled back to his knees. "Boss, please let me explain myself. I was doing a covert operation to flush Dario out. There's no way that he knows where we are. I was very careful," Heath said. "None of the guys who were left behind would dare to reveal anything about you," he added. He was certain of what he was saying because he had threatened the lives of their families if they divulged anything. Kyle kicked him again and answered for his boss. "Do you think that Dario is as stupid as you? They know about us now," he said disdainfully. "That's impossible," Heath replied, his eyes again filled with dread. "How could that be possible?" he thought.
I took a secret route and circled around for a long time before turning in here. How could they possibly know where I went?
It dawned on him suddenly that Kyle was right.
They could have caught me, but they let me slip away. It was so I would lead them to my boss. I made a terrible mistake, he thought. Dario is a clever man.
Kyle slapped him twice across the face and brought him back to the present.
Because of your stupidity, our plans are in tatters, and Dario knows about our existence. Death is too good for you,
he said, and spat in his face. Heath, despite his fear, felt angry. He has no right to hit me, he thought.
Kyle, you're going too far. I did this for the boss. I've worked for him for years and risked my life for him, he protested. If I ever get the chance, I'll kill Kyle for this, he thought. Oh, is that so, for the sake of the boss? If you use that poor excuse for a brain of yours, you'd realize that all you've done is work against the boss. You did this for yourself. You wanted to see if you could take Dario down on your own, but you failed, and all you've succeeded in doing is making a fool of yourself,
Kyle said with contempt. Heath glared back at him fiercely and then turned his gaze to his master.
Boss, I did this for you. I didn't expect to fail. I would never let you down on purpose, I swear it. I would sooner die than let you down.
The young man's mouth curled up in a nasty grin. He walked over to a cabinet, took another glass, and poured himself some more red wine. The scarlet liquid was like blood. It was his favorite color. He swirled it around in the glass and sniffed it, appreciating the aroma. The room was once again deathly silent.
Then you can die,
he said finally. He turned to face the trembling man on his knees and walked towards him. Heath knew very well how cruel his master's methods were. He had heard of the ways that he liked to dispatch those who had earned his displeasure, and his stomach churned in horror at the thought of what was to come.
No, boss, please, I've worked for you for years, he pleaded.
The boss has high expectations of those who are lucky enough to work for him, and you just haven't lived up to those expectations, Kyle said. Kyle took out from inside his jacket a large knife. Its keen edge shone brightly. He looked to the boss, who in turn nodded and said, "Proceed." The boss sat in his chair and once again swirled the wine in his glass and sniffed it in what looked like a bizarre ritual that he had performed many times before. The large knife swung, and Heath screamed as his right hand fell to the floor.
Boss, please, I was wrong. I'm sorry I failed you. Please let me go,
he wailed piteously. Kyle glanced at his boss, who in turn took another sip of wine and licked his lips. He looked thoughtful for a moment, and then said without expression, "Continue."
No, please, have mercy,
Heath pleaded. Kyle swung the knife again, and Heath's other hand fell to the floor with a sickening thud. After a moment's silence, his piercing screams rent the air. The young man smiled cruelly. He slowly stood up. His movements were elegant and his face was calm. He selected an old record from his collection and placed it in the record player. After a brief crackling sound, classical music sounded from the old machine. The music and the decor of the room were incongruous with the bloodstains and screaming. The strange mix of sounds made the young man smile. It would have been easy for Kyle to dispatch his victim quickly, but he was enjoying putting on a performance for both his boss and the surrounding men. Heath, still kneeling on the floor, looked down at his two severed hands in horror, his face pale with the shock of what he was enduring. The young man smiled as if he was watching something mildly amusing. Kyle stood behind Heath, held his knife to his throat and whispered into his ear, "Now you can have your mercy." Episode 249. A busy day for reporters.
Stop,
the boss's commanding voice boomed. Kyle withdrew his knife from Heath's throat and looked up at him. Heath's body was covered in blood, and the smell in the air was sickening. Kyle looked at his boss expectantly.
"Do you want to let him go, boss?"
he asked.
"No.
I want him to experience more fear and suffering," he answered with a smirk. "Besides, this place is compromised and I don't need it anymore. Burn it to the ground with him in it," he said coldly as he walked out of the study. Less than an hour later, he was airborne in his private jet while flames ravaged the old villa, spreading it through the trees toward nearby houses. The firefighters were unable to control the blaze, and it wasn't long before the entire area was a burnt wasteland, with videos posted online and on the local news. The news of the fire would have been the main topic of the day, were it not for the reports of a gang shootout at an old factory building. News reports mentioned that several gang members had been arrested by police, but that they had subsequently been shot by snipers on the way to the police station. The police had failed to locate the snipers, who had escaped. The chief of police had been furious and had ordered a thorough investigation to be carried out, but he had admitted that at the time, they had no leads. The news channels and social media were going crazy, scrambling for the latest updates on the two hot stories. In the hospital, Miranda had been checked over thoroughly by the doctors, who had informed Dario that, apart from a few cuts and bruises, she was physically fine, but suffering from shock. Dario remained by her side as she slept. He sat quietly on a chair next to her bed, a rare look of concern on his handsome face. Lucas, at Dario's instruction, had been sent to investigate whether there was any information about who had kidnapped Miranda. He returned with a grim expression on his face.
Dario, it doesn't look good. Several of the gang members that we fought in the factory were caught by the police, but they've all been assassinated, so we don't have any clues as to whom they were working for. We thought that we had tracked them to their hideout, but it seems that they were one step ahead of us, and they burned it to the ground, he added. He took out his phone and showed Dario a video of the villa burning. It looks like that scarred man was just a small fry. He was clearly just some hireling thug, Lucas explained.
Dario listened intently and looked thoughtfully out of the window. David stepped forward with his friend and said,
Dario, why are you so calm? Do you already know who these people are? If we know who they are, then let's make them pay for today.
Come on, Lucas said sarcastically.
You are nearly wetting yourself with fear of the factory. You haven't got it in you to make anyone pay, he taunted. What are you talking about, Lucas? I was there right next to you when the bullets were flying. Don't you dare call me a coward,
David retorted angrily. The noise of the two men arguing woke Miranda from her slumber, and she stirred and groaned. I feel like my whole body hurts, she moaned. She opened her eyes and squinted in the light. She looked around the unfamiliar room and recognized the three men who had saved her from her ordeal. David was the first to speak.
Mimi, you finally woke up. You had us worried half to death,
he said, as he poured her a cup of water and handed it to her. She was about to refuse the drink, but she had not drunk for over a day and her throat was parched, so she took the cup and drank thirstily. Once her thirst was satiated, she looked up at the handsome blonde man standing in front of her. How do you know my name? She asked in a hoarse voice. David stepped forward and took her hand in his tenderly.
We've been looking for you for the last 5 years, he said, and now we've found you.
Miranda pulled back her hand, confused. What do you mean? Why have you been looking for me?
5 years ago, you saved a man's life, and he's been searching for you ever since, David explained. You saved Dario's life, but then you disappeared, and we've been looking for you, and it looks like we found you just in time, he added.
What nonsense are you talking about? What do you mean about me disappearing? She quizzed him. She looked at the three men in complete confusion. They must have the wrong person, she thought. Episode 250. I don't remember. Thank you for saving me, but what you've just said? I don't know you, Miranda said.
Really? You don't remember what happened 5 years ago? Or do you save lots of people? Is that why you can't remember? Come and take a closer look. Our CEO, Dario Foster, is very handsome and not easy to forget, David said,
feeling a little weird. He'd been holding Dario's arm and now pointed at his face. Dario looked at him with murderous cold eyes, as if he wanted to chop David's hand off. David immediately stopped pointing at him and dropped his hands to his sides. Miranda blinked and took a closer look at Dario. She thought for a while, but her eyes still showed her confusion.
Forget it, Dario. Do you recognize her? Is it her or not?
David asked, sighing in exasperation. Dario sat down beside Miranda and looked at her in silence. She was extremely weak and hardly had the strength to speak.
Are you Mimi?
Dario queried, narrowing his dark, emotionless eyes. Miranda reacted when she heard Dario's magnetic, sexy voice. She raised her eyes pitifully and looked at him. He was undoubtedly handsome. She stared at him for a long time before she looked away and lowered her head. Yeah, I'm Mimi, but how do you know that?
We've met before. Don't you remember what happened 5 years ago?
Dario asked calmly. There was no expression on her face, and it wasn't easy to know what she was thinking or feeling. She frowned, trying to focus. Her mind was in turmoil. She had just experienced too many things. She'd been kidnapped again. She'd been held at gunpoint again. Her clothes had been slashed with a knife. All of this is a nightmare, she thought, shaking her head. I don't know you. I don't remember you. But I'm still very grateful to you, she said, her voice trembling.
So you don't remember me or what happened?
Dario asked again. Miranda looked directly at him and didn't respond. David was watching the two of them anxiously.
At this rate, we'll be here until next year, he thought. So Mimi, you don't remember saving his life 5 years ago? Anyway, we're thankful we could repay your kindness, David said.
What do you mean, saved his life? Miranda responded. She was confused by what David had said. This was all a little strange. She looked at the three unfamiliar men in front of her. She was wary and felt it was better not to get entangled with them. I'm feeling fine. I'm leaving, she said, weakly lifting the blanket and trying to get up from the bed.
David hurried over to support her. Wait a moment, don't move. The doctor says you need to rest, he said with concern.
Miranda looked at her surroundings. She was in a private room. It was very luxuriously furnished for a hospital. Looks expensive, she thought in dismay. She shook her head at David and said, No, I need to get back home. Besides, I don't like being in the hospital. David noticed the concern in her eyes and understood.
Mimi, are you worried about the medical bills? Don't worry, I've already paid. Please just rest and get your strength back.
But before David could finish his sentence, Dario interrupted coldly.
Let her go. Did I hear correctly? Let her go? You can't be serious,
David thought, carefully observing Dario's expression, but his deep eyes were unfathomable.
All right, I'll drive you,
David said, turning back to Miranda. He knew that he wouldn't win an argument with Dario. It's okay, I can get back myself, Miranda said, standing up from the bed with difficulty. Her legs were weak, and she didn't walk very steadily. David was afraid that she would fall and took her arm to steady her. However, Miranda was very stubborn and shrugged him off. She didn't want him to touch her. Miranda realized she was wearing a hospital gown. While she was wondering who had changed her, David hurriedly said,
A nurse changed you. Your clothes are in the wardrobe. We'll wait outside while you get dressed. Then I'll help you to the entrance and find you a taxi.
Miranda realized that he meant no harm and seemed concerned about her well-being. Thank you, she replied, accepting his help. She felt so weak. After David and Miranda had gone, Dario and Lucas were left alone. Lucas had been standing there motionlessly, observing what was going on. His eyes reflected his bewilderment at what he had witnessed.
I thought you'd been looking for the woman who saved you 5 years ago. Now you find her and let her go?
He asked in confusion. Without answering, Dario took his phone out of his pocket and read a text message from Caroline.
I need to get back to Washington, he snapped. I want you to stay to look after Mimi and protect her.
Although Lucas was puzzled, he nodded and didn't say anything. Dario kept looking at his watch. He was clearly impatient to return to Washington. Is it because the woman in Washington is more important than the one in New York? Lucas wondered. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening. Jade had been on the film set all day without taking a break. She had only stopped for a few minutes in the afternoon to eat a snack and then returned to filming. The director was afraid she would be too tired to continue, so he wanted to break so she could rest. However, Jade forced herself to continue and said she would rest after shooting the last scene. It had not been easy to sign Robert Radcliffe as the male lead actor, and the director wanted to make the most of it. So far, there'd been no kissing scenes in the entire TV series, and the director thought it was time to spice things up a little. So, without discussing it with the producer, he decided impulsively at the last minute to add a kissing scene. Because he had decided at the last moment to add a kissing scene, the director was giving Jade special guidance. Jade was unhappy at being put in this difficult situation. What could she do? Episode 251. Who shouted cut? Though in a difficult position, Jade still wanted to give the scene her best shot. She didn't want the director to think she was putting on airs, and she didn't want to disappoint him. Jade was usually very professional, but when she knew she was going to have to perform a kissing scene, she started making mistakes. The director was very unhappy.
Jade, what's wrong with you today?
He asked, looking exasperated.
You have to show that you have to leave, but that you don't want to leave. Okay, let's do it again.
She tried her best to follow the director's instructions and do what he wanted, but she still felt uncomfortable. She didn't want to kiss an unfamiliar man.
Let's roll,
the director instructed, as the clap of the clapperboard reverberated across the set. Robert was walking toward her, and then she started to recite her lines. Don't be like this. We can't be together. There was a trace of painful reluctance in her voice. She took a step back from Robert, now standing in front of her. But he took another step forward and, grabbing her waist, pulled her toward him. She froze in shock and raised her eyes to look at him. Then she pulled away, struggling from his hold, seeming to reject him. Robert stared at her and said,
"No, I won't leave you. I love you more than life."
Robert lowered his head and was about to kiss her, but Jade turned her head away to avoid his lips. Although there was no detail in the script about the kissing scene or the emotions he wanted to be portrayed, the director didn't stop the filming. Sometimes scenes required the actors to perform them instinctively, but he felt that Jade was struggling too much and they would have to film the scene again. If Jade continued like this, he would be stuck. Robert's eyes darkened when Jade turned her head to avoid his kiss.
"I can't take this anymore. What do I do next?"
he thought in frustration. He leaned close to her ear and whispered,
"If you want to become a professional actor, you'll have to overcome this phobia."
He was trying to be patient and encourage her because he knew she was inexperienced. He wanted to guide her to become a better actor, and he didn't blame her for what had just happened. As this had been an unexpected change to the script, neither of them had been prepared. Jade's body was trembling. She felt angry at being in this position. She took a deep breath, looked at Robert, and frowned. Robert didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw her pained expression. In reality, most women wanted to kiss him, but this woman, who was clearly a newcomer and an unknown actress, didn't have the slightest inclination.
"This is a strange situation to be in,"
he thought in amusement. He hugged her reassuringly and whispered,
"Close your eyes and try to forget it's me you're kissing. You can keep your mouth closed if it makes you more comfortable. I won't do anything unnecessary."
A flush rose to Jade's face, and she grimaced, drawing her mouth into a tight line. She looked nervous, but determined. Robert could feel her shaking. As he lowered his head to kiss her, her fragrance engulfed him. She smelled fresh. Her delicate and tender lips were enticing.
"What's wrong with me?" he thought. "Why is she affecting me this way?"
It felt like his heart moved and skipped a beat. He had performed kissing scenes with countless actresses, but he had never experienced such feelings before.
"It's just a shoot," he reminded himself. "Don't take it seriously."
He realized he was looking forward to the kissing scene with Jade. The closer Robert's lips got, the more anxious Jade became. Dario kept appearing in her mind. His handsome face, his overbearing manner, his kiss, everything about him. Just as their lips were about to touch, someone shouted, "Cut!" Jade's heart jumped, and she took a quick step back. She was happy that the moment had been interrupted. Robert looked annoyed. He had wanted intimate contact with Jade. Everyone on the set turned to gaze toward the director in unison. There had been no problem with the scene until then, so they were not sure why he'd stopped filming.
"Who cut the scene?"
he demanded angrily. It had certainly not been him.
"It was me."
A cold voice reverberated from the back of the film set. Everyone turned toward the voice and recognized the speaker as Robert's manager. He was known as one of the best managers in the industry. The man strode purposefully toward the director and said something to him that no one could hear. The director's expression changed.
"What did you say? You want a double to do the kissing scene?"
He seldom used doubles and did not think that the scene required one. In fact, he wanted the actors to do the scene. Also, he knew that Robert was a very dedicated actor and did not like using doubles. He even did his own stunts. And here was his manager saying that a kissing double would do the scene on his behalf. He couldn't believe it and was about to object vehemently when the producer approached him. He had a severe expression and whispered something into the director's ear.
"I'm sorry, Dario Foster is the film's main investor. If he wants a kissing double, he gets one,"
he whispered into the director's ear. Episode 252, A Perfect Kiss. The director's expression changed, and he nodded in agreement. Usually, an investor wouldn't interfere with the film's production, let alone care about a kissing scene, so he was confused and a little irritated. The director gritted his teeth and decided it was not worth falling out with the movie's biggest investor. He would first wait and see the results of using the double for the kissing scene. If it didn't meet his standards, he would insist that Robert do the scene personally. Jade's eyebrows furrowed. She had initially heaved a sigh of relief, but her nervousness returned. She initially thought the director had stopped filming because he had changed his mind about the kissing scene. She hadn't expected it to be Robert's manager, or that Robert's role would be played by a double. But she still had to shoot the kissing scene. It didn't matter who she kissed. She would be uncomfortable and nervous kissing any man other than her husband. Robert's expression was downcast, and he seemed agitated. He strode toward his manager and asked coldly, "What's going on? I never asked for a double to do this scene." He'd been looking forward to this kiss. His manager leaned toward him and, in a low voice, said, "Robert, I'm doing this for your own good. You should trust me. I always act in your best interests." Robert angrily strode off and sat down. A few minutes passed, and a very imposing man walked onto the stage, who he assumed was his double. The people on the set were stunned and started to chatter among themselves. "Wow, he's so handsome. Oh my, is he really the double? He's so good-looking, even more so than Robert. Quickly, hold me. I'm going to faint. Who is he? I've never seen him before." The double's appearance had electrified the atmosphere on the set. Robert's expression changed and his face flushed. "Why would my manager do this?" he thought in confusion. His manager had decided this because he had been told that if Robert did the kissing scene, he would be banned from the internet, and he knew that the person who had asked to be his double was very capable of carrying out that threat. When Jade saw who the double was, she was utterly stunned and in disbelief. He walked toward her, gave her a captivating smile and said, "Hello, Miss Winslet." Jade suppressed her excitement and answered coolly, "Hi." The handsome man in front of her was her husband, Dario. Why is he here? She thought, trying to make sense of his presence. He had gone to New York the previous night. Questions raced through her mind. Why is he back so soon? Did he come to the set to see me? She wondered. Dario stepped closer to Jade, and before the director could call roll, he put his arms around her waist and kissed her. His actions were so sudden that no one on set had time to react. The director, who wanted to stop them, looked on in surprise. Not only was Jade not resisting, but she was reciprocating. Jade was also stunned by Dario's actions, but she instinctively responded to him, her body filling with familiar warmth. She hugged his sturdy body and closed her eyes, losing herself in the kiss. "Okay, excellent," the director said, and continued impatiently. "What are you all standing around for? Lights, camera, action." He was irritated that the kissing double had started without his signal, but what he saw excited him. It was captivating. Everyone on the set immediately immersed themselves in filming the scene. Dario held Jade's slender waist with one hand and the back of her head with the other, making their kiss even more intimate. Jade's face became flushed. Although this was not the first time she had kissed Dario, it was the first time in front of a group of people, and she was feeling shy, so she started to pull away. Dario tightened his hold, kissing her more and more intensely. He had only been away from Jade for one night, but he realized how much he missed her. Violet watched from the side, her eyes twinkling. It's a live kissing scene, and they're both so good-looking, she thought. What she was seeing was explosive. Sometimes kissing scenes were more serious than passionate. These two were wholly immersed in their kiss and oblivious to those around them. The surrounding people, who were not involved in the filming, whispered among themselves. "Wow, I want a kiss from that double. He's so handsome, only a beautiful actor like Jade Winslet can match him. This is so intense." Meanwhile, the director shouted encouragingly, "Good, that's great." The director hadn't expected the kissing double's acting skills to be so excellent. They even surpassed Robert's. This is what's needed to make this a blockbuster, he thought. Episode 253, The Kissing Double. The director decided to include some of the riveting footage of the kissing scene in the trailer. Robert was sitting on the side watching the filming with a pale face. He looked coldly at the two people entangled with each other. He couldn't believe that Jade didn't resist, and even kissed the man back. It had not been like that with him. She hadn't even wanted to touch him. Who is that man? Robert wondered. Robert felt disappointed when he saw Dario's lips touch Jade's. He wished he was the double kissing her. When the director had been instructed that a double would do the kiss rather than Robert, he had been unhappy. But now, he was delighted with this result. He hadn't witnessed such an intense kissing scene in his many years as a director. The kiss, in the context of the tragic circumstances, would move the audience.
Cameraman, a close-up, closer, good, that's it. It's a wrap,
the director shouted excitedly. Although it had been troublesome to introduce the kissing scene, the director felt it had been worth the effort. He knew that Jade disliked shooting such scenes, but instead of a forced kissing scene with Robert, he had witnessed passionate kissing with the double.
I'll have a talk with Jade about this, he thought.
He resolved that in the future he would always use this double for Jade's kissing scenes. The scene was filmed 3 times to capture every angle. It was late and everyone was exhausted, especially Jade. She felt smothered by the kissing and gave a sigh of relief when the filming ceased. However, Jade was unaffected because he would be happy to spend all day kissing Jade. Jade looked at her husband with dismay. She knew that the scene had been good, and she had enjoyed kissing him, but she was irritated that he had kissed her using his tongue. She took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. Dario strode off the set immediately when filming was concluded. To most of the film crew, Dario was just the mysterious kissing double. They had no idea who he was. They started to chatter animatedly among themselves, giving Dario and Jade a round of applause. "That was great! Really excellent! The kissing was so real, I'm about to cry. Hey, where's he going? I want his autograph and a photo with him." Jade flushed with embarrassment. She jabbed her side with her index finger to bring her back to reality and watched Dario leave, her eyes full of love. However, the director and the others didn't take much notice of Jade's expression. They thought she'd been so immersed in the filming that she was still in character. The director was so delighted that he offered to treat everyone to supper. Jade declined, saying she was too tired and wanted to rest. Before Dario had left, he had whispered to Jade that he would wait for her, making her heart burst with joy. She quickly walked toward her changing room. It was already 11 at night, and she was relieved that the day's work was over. Violet rushed over to her excitedly. "Wow, I didn't realize you were so talented," she said. "And you don't realize how envious us women are that you got to kiss that hunk." Violet paused and continued. "Doesn't he look familiar to you? Maybe I've seen him in my dreams." "You secretly took pictures of him, so of course he looks familiar," Jade thought incredulously. She smiled at Violet, fighting hard to maintain her composure, and went and sat at the dressing table. Violet immediately took the initiative to help Jade remove her makeup with cotton wipes and makeup remover. There was a look of excitement on her face. "He's very handsome, but he's still a double, an unknown. Robert's different, and he's the heartthrob of the country. If you'd done the kissing scene with him, your value would have skyrocketed." "Most female actors who have done kissing scenes with him have become celebrities," Violet said, rattling on as she tried to help Jade analyze the pros and cons of kissing a double rather than Robert. Jade didn't say anything and listened patiently to Violet, smiling. Her eyes sparkled. Violet continued helping Jade remove her makeup. Her thoughts were filled with the image of the kissing double. She couldn't stop thinking about him. She looked at Jade thoughtfully and then asked, "Why are you smiling? Have you taken a fancy to the double?" Then, as an afterthought, she added, "He's so good looking that he's probably very popular with the ladies. Don't waste your time on him." Jade didn't respond. If she realizes he's my husband, it'll drive her crazy, she thought in amusement. "Go home and rest. You've been shooting for a long time and you must be exhausted," Violet said, patting her on the shoulder. Jade nodded in agreement, her thoughts focusing on seeing Dario. She wasn't paying attention, nor did she care about what Violet was saying. Violet turned to Jade and said, "I know I've seen that man before. Maybe I did meet him in a dream." She looked perplexed. Episode 254. Why are they photographing us? Jade was amused by Violet's comments. Just then, Caroline knocked and entered the changing room. She walked over to Jade and said in a soft voice, "Hurry up, Dario's waiting for you outside." Violet overheard, and her eyebrows shot up. She asked curiously, "Dario? Who is Dario? And why is he waiting for you?" Jade smiled awkwardly. Before she could respond, Caroline snapped, "Don't worry about things that aren't your business." Violet was taken aback and immediately apologized. "Yes, I suppose it isn't. I'm sorry, Caroline. I won't ask any more." There was a trace of embarrassment on her face from the reprimand. Caroline's attitude softened a little, and she said to her, "All right, let me take you to the hotel where you'll be spending the night. Let's go." "Okay, thank you," Violet said, and gave Jade a quick goodbye hug before grabbing her overnight bag and following Caroline. Jade walked out and saw a black Rolls-Royce parked about 100 yards away. She assumed it was Dario's car and hurriedly strode toward it. He was the only person in the car. Did he drive from New York himself? He wondered. He usually had a driver. Dario impatiently opened the passenger door and indicated she should get in. Jade found the passenger seat had been pulled down and she couldn't sit. Dario pushed her down, so she was almost lying flat. He bent over, pulled the door closed, and pressed his lips to hers. The confined space in the car was very intimate. Their kiss was even more passionate than during the filming. He was becoming aroused and restraining himself. He drew away and moved his lips to Jade's ear. In his low and bewitching voice, he said, "Did you miss me 100 times today?" "No, I was very busy today. I didn't have time to miss you," Jade said, teasingly sticking her tongue out at him and smiling. Dario's face darkened and she continued, "Maybe not 100 times, but at least 99. I missed you." As she spoke, she extended her arms around his neck and kissed him on the lips. "Don't think you can seduce me wherever you want just because I've fallen for you hook, line, and sinker," he said. Dario was pleased she was taking the initiative, and it aroused him. Jade heard the desire and impatience in his voice. She pulled away and, somewhat embarrassingly, said, "I don't do it on purpose." After a pause, she continued shyly, "By the way, why are you here? You didn't tell me that apart from being in charge of the Milliken Agency's finances, you're in charge of kissing scenes in movies." Dario smiled and pressed her down on the chair again. Then he kissed her nose playfully and said gently, "Yes, I miss Jade's exclusive kissing double. From now on, I'll do all your kissing scenes." "Dario, you're so bad and selfish." Jade's words were intended in jest, but no sooner were the words out of her mouth than Dario responded in a domineering tone. "What? Do you want to shoot kissing scenes with someone else? Who? I'll get them fired." Jade was taken aback and didn't dare say anything in response. Why he's always so domineering? It scares me, she thought. Eventually, Jade said, "No one. Why would I want to shoot kissing scenes with anyone but you?" She gave him a coy smile and mimicked him by pinching his nose playfully. He's incredibly handsome, too handsome. That's why women lust after him, she thought. But he was hers, and they were alone. She was savoring being in his arms, although she was exhausted. She cherished every moment she was with him. After lying together in silence for a while, she said with some disappointment, "By the way, I need to get some sleep. I must be up early tomorrow. I'll try to finish the scene as soon as possible and get back to you." Dario's heart beat faster when he heard her words. She had touched him deeply. If Caroline hadn't sent him a message, he wouldn't have known that Jade had been shooting for 10 straight hours, and that she was being forced to shoot a kissing scene. "Let's not go back to the hotel they booked you in," he said. "It's got single beds, and I want to cuddle you." Dario adjusted his seat and started the car. Jade wanted to ask where he was taking her, but she was too tired to speak. "Lie down and rest. I'll wake you when we arrive," Dario said, patting her head. Jade knew that the small mountain village they were shooting in was remote, and she was staying in the only hotel. She didn't know that Dario had already booked a better hotel in the neighboring town, half an hour away. When they arrived, he picked her up gently and carried her to the hotel's reception. Although she felt embarrassed, she didn't struggle. There were paparazzi waiting, who started photographing them as soon as they entered. "I'm not famous enough for the paparazzi to photograph me," she thought, and buried her head further into Dario's chest. "Why are they photographing us?" she asked in a whisper. Episode 255. Transparency is not always good. "Don't worry, ignore them," Dario answered confidently. Jade was speechless as they entered the room. It was a large and luxurious presidential suite, and it did not match the rundown outward appearance of the hotel at all. Dario carried her to the bed, kissed her, and then touched her belly tenderly. "Doesn't he realize I'm on my period?" she thought. She moved his hand away, lowered her eyes shyly and said, "Dario, it's only the second day. I'm still, so we can't have sex tonight." He laughed and replied, "I was just going to ask you if you're hungry." "Oh," she replied, slightly embarrassed by the misunderstanding. "I'm not hungry. Let's get ready for bed and go to sleep. We have an early start tomorrow." He was about to reply when she bombarded him with a series of questions. "Have you finished all your business in New York? Don't you have work to do tomorrow? Are you sure that you'll have time to come?" Facing his wife's barrage of questions, he didn't know which one to answer first. "Don't worry," he began. "Nothing is more important than you. Anyway, I know you can't sleep at night without me," he said with a cheeky smile. "As for whether you're hungry or not, I was just asking. You're a big star now, so you need to pay attention to your figure. I'm afraid you'll have to eat a bit less in the future," he added. She frowned and asked, "What do you mean by that? Are you saying that I'm fat?" She looked down and pinched her belly and couldn't see any fat. "I'm not fat at all," she thought. "I might not have a six-pack, but I don't really want one." She looked at her husband, who was smiling like a naughty schoolboy. "I think he's making fun of me," she realized. "Go take a bath," Dario suggested. "I have some matters to take care of. I left you some pajamas in the bathroom." He picked her up in his arms, and she pretended to struggle as he carried her in the direction of the bathroom. "He seems to be enjoying teasing me," she thought. Jade giggled happily as he pretended to stumble due to her apparent excessive weight, and she hit him in mock anger. He put her down at the door, and she walked into the bathroom smiling happily. There was a set of pajamas, underwear, and a towel on the shelf. The pajamas were new, conservative, and looked very comfortable. "That's very considerate of him," she thought. "He just wants me to be comfortable." Dario went to the desk, switched on his laptop, and turned his attention to his work. Although he was able to delegate most of it, he felt it was important to take a close interest in what was going on and to make sure that things were getting done properly. Jade noticed with great surprise that the walls of the bathroom and even the bath itself were made of transparent glass. She felt both embarrassed and self-conscious. Who would design a room like this? What on earth was the designer thinking, she wondered. And why has Dario booked us a suite with a transparent bathroom? She held her pajamas in her arms and looked through the transparent wall at Dario in the next room. His back was facing her, and he seemed engrossed in his laptop, so she relaxed a little. She felt very tired and was desperate to take a bath and unwind. She took off her clothes and eased herself into the warm, soapy water. Her body relaxed instantly, and she closed her eyes and started to sing happily. As she was facing away from Dario, she didn't notice that her singing had attracted his attention. Her melodic voice was the first thing to intrigue him, but once he looked over and saw Jade's naked body through the layers of transparent glass, his attention was intently focused on her every move. Jade continued washing and singing happily, unaware of the dark eyes staring at her. Her hands moved sensually over her delicate neck, massaging the tense muscles there. Dario watched as the bubbles formed on her back as she lathered herself, making her skin barely visible and teasing his imagination. His mouth felt dry, and he turned off his computer. Although he looked calm, his heart felt like it was beating uncontrollably in his chest, and his breathing became shallow and labored. He walked over to the fridge, chose a bottle of wine, and poured himself a glass. Although he drank thirstily, it did little to alleviate the sensation of a dry throat. Jade seemed to be in a good mood and was utterly absorbed in her singing, unaware of being watched. Seeing her move her delicate hands around her body, Dario desperately wanted to have her, but he knew that she wouldn't want to have sex that night. He felt the deep frustration of wanting her but not being able to have her. Dario couldn't bear it any longer. He put his wine glass down on the desk and walked toward the bathroom. Episode 256. The Uncontrollable Temptation. Dario stood at the door and called out, "Jade, if you spend too long in the bath, you'll end up shriveled like a prune. You should come out now." Jade had been happily singing in her own little world, but the sound of her husband's voice brought her back to reality, and she looked around and saw his handsome face looking through the transparent door. He was staring at her body, and she squealed at the sense of intrusion. His face looked slightly flushed, and she could see that he was aroused from the misshapen bulge in his pants. She covered her private parts as well as she could with her hands and frowned at him. "Dario, you were meant to be working, not sneaking around watching me in the bath," she said indignantly. As soon as her initial shock was over, her anger turned to embarrassment, and she blushed furiously and lowered her eyes. Dario observed her long eyelashes and beautiful almond eyes. She looked so vulnerable, he thought. I just want to kiss her. Jade was unaware that by covering herself, she had only intrigued him further and fed his now stimulated imagination. He began to fantasize about what they could do together, and to him, her shyness seemed like a deliberate, seductive ploy. He looked longingly at her long, slender legs and narrowed his eyes.
Surely she knows that she's driving me insane, he thought. Will you hurry up and come out? Are you trying to kill me? He asked in frustration. She could see his obvious annoyance and got out of the bar, quickly drying herself, during which time Dario caught several glances that only did more to arouse his lust. No longer able to suppress his desire, he rushed into the bathroom and covered her tormenting body in a large towel. Take these pajamas and get dressed under the covers, will you? He said. Jade was amused at his lack of self-control and innocently took the pajamas and followed his instructions. Dario immediately took off his own clothes and rushed into the bathroom to take a cold shower. After she changed into her new pajamas, Jade saw that Dario was in the shower and she began scrolling through her social media. Caroline had told her that she had to monitor her accounts every day, post the occasional comment, and even reply to some of the personal messages from her fans. She looked at the selfie of her that Dario had posted and saw that it had received tens of thousands of positive comments. She read a few, smiled, and replied to several of them. Within moments of her replies, there were a multitude of new posts. Wow, Jade Winslet actually replied to my message. She must be really down to earth if she replies to her fans. I will always be your #1 fan. You're the best. Jade smiled happily at the overwhelming support from her fans. Then, tiredness hit her, and she rubbed her eyes and called to Dario, Are you done in the shower yet? Don't take too long. Let's have an early night. She didn't dare to watch him in the shower because his body was too seductive. He was muscular, in an athletic way that made clothes fit him perfectly, but when he was naked, she could see the definition of his muscles and the way they moved separately, as if they each had a mind of their own. Dario's deep voice called back from the bathroom. Turn off the lights and go to sleep. I'll join you soon. Okay, she said sleepily. She wanted to wait for him, but she felt sleepy, and the bed was very comfortable. Dario stayed in the shower for a long time and eventually managed to overcome his arousal. When he got to the bed, Jade had already fallen into a deep sleep. She had carefully settled herself on one side and had left enough space for him. There was a faint smile on her face, and she looked very alluring. To his frustration, he felt his arousal start again. Good night, he whispered, and kissed her on the forehead before he climbed in next to her. Jade felt him cuddle up to her, and she nestled back instinctively into his embrace as she slept. She dreamed of Dario and her laying together on a sunny beach with the sound of gentle waves in the distance. Jade woke up naturally, beating the alarm that she had set, and she reached over and turned it off before it buzzed unnecessarily. She turned her head sleepily and found Dario looking at her. Episode 257. You Will Always Look Pretty to Me. Jade turned to find Dario staring at her. He had one hand on her slim waist, and there was a faint smile on his face. The morning sun shone on him through the window, and he looked devilishly handsome. Why is he always so handsome? Jade wondered. He doesn't look like he's just woken up at all. Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt a little flustered. How long has he been watching me? She thought, feeling embarrassed. Good morning, Dario said in a deep, enchanting voice, before kissing her gently on the lips. She blushed in response and said, Dario, don't stare at me when I've just woken up. I must look in a complete state. Nonsense, you never look that way to me on any morning, even though it's your period, he replied. You relax while I make us some breakfast. He gently stroked her soft hair and then kissed her on the lips before sliding out of bed. She watched him move across the room toward his clothes and noticed that he must have slept naked. Her sleepy eyes watched his body, transfixed by the way it moved. It was so lithe and in control, like a lion prowling. Dario glanced back over his shoulder and saw Jade watching him. She blushed and averted her gaze. You can watch me if you want. You're allowed to watch your husband, he said with a smile as he got dressed. He was aware of his effect on her, and he deliberately slowed down, showing off his muscular body and watching her cunningly out of the corner of his eyes. Why would I want to watch you get dressed? She asked. Just hurry up and put your clothes on. She pulled the blanket to cover her head and pretended to doze while he finished getting ready. When she was confident that he would be finished, she peeked out from behind the duvet and let out a sigh of relief to see that he was fully clothed. A thought occurred to her. Dario, this is a hotel, so how could you make breakfast for me? Don't you have to order room service? She asked. Don't worry, the hotel must have a kitchen. You just wait here, he said. You can't just wander into the hotel's kitchen and start cooking breakfast, she said with a giggle. He looked after her with love in his eyes, and she felt warm and safe. He looks after me so well, she thought. Dario turned to leave the room, but just as he was about to open the door,
Jade rushed to him and hugged him tightly from behind. He was stunned for a moment, and then he turned and kissed her.
"You just can't bear to let me go, can you?" he said, with an amused expression. "Don't worry, I'll be back soon."
She didn't answer, but instead continued hugging him in silence. He gently slid out of her embrace and reached out for the door handle, and she said in a strained voice, "Don't go! Let me hug you like this. I'll be fine in a while." He looked down at her and saw that she was crying.
"What's wrong?"
he asked gently. "Dario, why are you so good to me? It makes me feel scared that one day, if you leave me, I'll never feel this way again," she said between sobs. She wiped her eyes with her fingers and looked up at him. "Sometimes I wish that he would just treat me badly, so that if he ever left me, it wouldn't hurt so much," she thought. Dario looked at her with a loving expression. He kissed her passionately and then gazed into her eyes. "You're silly," he said. "You're my wife, and I will never leave you. I'll be good to you until the day that I die." "Really? Do you promise?" Jade asked. "Of course," he replied seriously. His words calmed her, and she began to feel silly. "Shh, now. It doesn't look good when you cry. You're a famous actress now," he said in a soothing voice. "You just relax and wait for your breakfast." She nodded in reply and gave him one last squeeze before climbing back into bed. Half an hour later, Dario returned carrying a sumptuous breakfast on a silver tray. He placed it on the table and said, "For you, my dear." Jade had put on a white dress and had tied her hair up. She wore a little light makeup and looked pure and fresh. Violet had explained to her that she needed to always look her best in case the paparazzi jumped out and took a photo of her, and Jade had taken the advice seriously. "They will be happy to get any pictures of you," she had said, "but they will especially want ones of you looking bad." Dario's eyes lit up when he saw her. She looked brimming with energy and vitality. No wonder her fans adore her, he thought. Sometimes I wish she wasn't so perfect. Then maybe there wouldn't be so many men drooling over her. "Would you like your breakfast, Mrs. Foster?" he asked deferentially. She liked the sound of Mrs. Foster, and it made her smile. She was about to sit down at the table when Dario grabbed her and pulled her onto his lap. She struggled to stand up, but he said, "Don't get up, sit properly. I'll feed you." "No, I'll eat it myself," she replied, embarrassed at the thought of being fed. As she struggled, her hand accidentally touched his private parts, and her body stiffened in surprise. Dario whispered in her ear in a low voice, "Don't try to get up again, or I will ravage you." Surely he's joking, he thought, but he doesn't sound like he's joking. "Open your mouth," he said in a commanding tone that she felt unable to resist. She opened her mouth, and he fed her a spoonful of oatmeal with honey and blueberries mixed in. It tasted delicious, and she moaned in appreciation. As she finished her oatmeal, Jade asked, "Dario, why did you turn up last night? And why did you act as a double for Robert Radcliffe?" Dario was silent. Episode 258. A Professional Actor. Before Dario could answer, she continued, "I thought that you were in charge of finances at your company. You really are very mysterious. Both you and your sister are so rich and powerful, and Violet told me that your car is worth hundreds of thousands. Your house must be worth an absolute fortune," she said. His wealth is almost unimaginable, she thought. "I've already told you. You'll understand it all in time. Also, why do you care so much about kissing Robert Radcliffe?" he asked, with a suspicious look in his eyes. "Do you really want to shoot a kissing scene with him?" Dario held her tightly in his arms and looked searchingly at her face while he waited for her to answer. Jade had just taken a spoonful of oatmeal and had not heard what he had said. "What did you say?" she asked, covering her mouth with her hand. His expression darkened. He took the spoon out of her hand and spooned some oatmeal into his own mouth with it. "Dario," she exclaimed, "you are eating my saliva." "Even your saliva is sweet to me," he replied, amused at her shocked expression. She snatched her spoon back and continued to eat her breakfast, but Dario had no intention of being diverted from what he was saying. "Are you disappointed that you didn't get to film the kissing scene with Robert Radcliffe last night?" he asked, forcing himself to speak calmly. Jade knew him well enough to hear the trace of jealousy in his words. She smiled and said mischievously, "Yes, my assistant said that if I could shoot a kissing scene with a famous star like Robert, it would do a lot for my reputation. Anyway," she continued, "he's so handsome, and it would have been a rare opportunity for me." "So you actually wanted to have a kissing scene with that Robert. If it wasn't for me, you would have done it. Is that right?" Dario asked, with barely controlled anger in his voice. Jade finished her oatmeal, stood up, and put her hands on her hips. I'm a professional actor. I have to be allowed to do my job properly. Besides, it was just a kissing scene. There might even be bed scenes in the future, so you better get used to it, she said assertively. She watched Dario's expression as she spoke, intrigued to see how he would react, but she was surprised to see that he remained calm. Does that mean that he doesn't care about me being with other men? She wondered.
Oh, so you're looking forward to shooting bed scenes, are you? He asked. Well, I'll phone the director and make sure that he adds some into the movie, as well as some more kissing scenes. I can be Robert Radcliffe's double again. I don't mind getting naked in front of people, Dario said triumphantly. He turned around and started packing away his work things on the desk. Does he really not know that I was joking? Jade wondered, frustrated at his response. I know that he cares about me, she thought. He wouldn't have done everything he's done for me if he didn't love me. She felt her resolve waver and doubts set in. Suddenly, she felt guilty about how she had responded. He's always so good to me. I shouldn't have teased him, she thought guiltily. Dario finished putting his things into his bag and said, Let's go. I'll take you back. Jade looked at him quizzically, trying to gauge how he was feeling, but his face was inscrutable. She stepped up to him, put her arms around him, and said shyly, Dario, I was just joking with you. I don't want to do any kissing scenes or bed scenes with any man. If you hadn't turned up, I would have refused to do the scene. She lowered her eyes as she spoke, and she didn't see the bright smile that lit up Dario's face. He hugged her back, kissed her on the cheek, and said, Of course I knew you were joking. He was playing with me, she thought, frustrated at being duped. He knew that I was joking, and he let me feel bad that I would tell him how I really feel. He's too clever for his own good. I'll remember this for next time. She pouted and looked up at him. I hate you, she said coquettishly. Dario stared at her. Episode 259. It was for your own good. Dario then said, How rude, with a laugh. Dario smiled and gently put on a pair of large dark sunglasses on Jade, and then he took her hand and led her out of the hotel toward the car. She climbed in, but there was still doubt and worry on her face. Dario held her hand in his and looked at her with a serious expression. Jade, remember that you're my wife. No matter who I am or what I do for a living, to you I have only one identity. I am your husband. I just want to be judged by you on how I am as a husband, not in my background, he said. I don't care about your background, she replied. But I still want to know more about my husband, she thought. In that case, there's no problem, he said, and he reached out and stroked her hair. He looked at her with deep affection and continued talking. I haven't told you everything about me and about everything I've done, but one day you'll understand everything about me. I won't tell you now for your own good. Do you understand? She shook her head and said, Dario, I don't get it. Why don't you let me know everything about you now? What do you mean that it's for my own good? I know that he's good to me and that he would never hurt me, but I want to know all about him, she thought. The more he tells me that it's better for me not to know, the more I want to know, she reflected. I promise that you'll find out sooner or later. Just trust me, he said, with a serious look in his eyes. What does he mean that it's for my own good? She wondered. Maybe it's best if I just trust him, she decided. Dario leaned over and fastened her seatbelt, taking the opportunity to kiss her on the cheek. All you need to do now is to follow your heart, he said. Whatever you choose to do with your life, I will be there for you. He didn't want to tell her about his past because he didn't want her to feel inferior to him. She came from a humble background, and he didn't want the complication of her feeling intimidated by his own upbringing. I don't want her thinking that her success in life is because of me and my connections, he thought. I want her to feel like she's succeeding on her own. I want to provide a safe world for her, and I want her to feel happy and content. If I can do that for her, then everything we go through will be worth it, he thought. Jade smiled at him sweetly and nodded. She decided to trust him and to believe in him. He's earned my trust, she thought. At first, Jade had been overwhelmed by Dario's looks and his authoritative presence, but now she felt attached to him in a different way. She had grown accustomed to him being there, to his commanding tone and his dominant ways of looking out for her. It feels like I'm infatuated with him, she thought. Dario started the car and drove slowly. Jade took a deep breath and said, Dario, I have something to tell you, and I want you to take me seriously. You know that there will be no kissing scenes and bed scenes in my acting career. She paused, unsure of how to continue. Am I preparing him for what's to come? Or am I preparing myself? She wondered. I don't know yet if I can do either of those things,
So how can I ask him to accept it? Perhaps I'm just not cut out to be an actress. Maybe Robert was right. Maybe I should just leave the acting business to the professionals. Dario guessed what she was thinking, and he smiled meaningfully. You shouldn't worry about it, he said. From now on, you have me as a kiss substitute for any of those seedy actors who want to kiss you. Oh, and don't forget that I also do bed scenes, he added. How could this possibly work? Jade asked. You're so rich and busy. You can't just turn up on film sets whenever I need to kiss someone, she protested. Although if you did take up acting, you would probably end up much more famous than that Robert Radcliffe, she added, looking at him with adoration. Your sister is the boss of Adele Barraque. How could the brother of such an important person end up being a stand-in for kiss scenes? She went on. I can't let you do it, she added firmly. He laughed in response and said, What does my sister have to do with it? I think it will be fun, he continued. We can just pretend that we're at home and that the people around us are nothing more than air when we're on the sets. Jade rolled her eyes irritably at Dario and said, You can be Robert Radcliffe's body double this time, but I have no idea whom I'll work with next time. You won't be able to stand in for every single actor that I have to kiss in my career. Episode 260. Think of me 100 times. Jade thought. He can't possibly have influence with every director that I work for, she thought, not to mention all the actors. Although she didn't know how he had become Robert's double, she knew that it couldn't have been an easy thing to set up. Robert Radcliffe was, after all, a famous actor and probably not used to being pushed out of a scene. The more she thought about her future acting career, the more certain she became that it wouldn't be possible for Dario to be the body double for every romantic scene that she was going to act in. It's just something that we're both going to have to get used to, she thought. Dario slowed the car down and looked at her meaningfully. As long as I'm your husband, no man in the world will ever touch you. They won't get the chance. Your kisses and your body belong to me and to me alone, he said, with a touch of arrogance. Listening to him speak so frankly about kisses and her body, Jade imagined their bodies entangled and she felt embarrassed. She blushed and looked down to the floor. She struggled to banish the images from her mind, fearful that Dario would guess what she was thinking about, but the thoughts lingered longer than she was comfortable with. Her eyes met Dario's, and there was a distinct smile on his face. He sat in silence with an air of absolute confidence in himself. About half an hour later, Dario pulled up by the set, far enough from the film crew to afford them some privacy to say goodbye. Then, he took her hand in his and said gently, All right, you better go. He leaned over and unbuckled her seatbelt. She found it difficult to separate herself from him, and just before she was about to leave, she asked, Are you going back to Washington? He nodded. Yes, I have something to do there later, he replied. Then don't come back tonight, she said. It's too far for you to travel. It would take you more than 2 hours to drive there and back, and you'd still have to get a room. You would be exhausted, and I don't want you to work so hard just for me. I probably won't be able to sleep at night without him, but I can't ask him to travel back and forth like that, she thought. Also, the hotel would cost a fortune. He was happy that his wife was so considerate of him, and he kissed her on the lips before letting her go. Caroline and Violet were parked not far away and had seen the interaction between them through the open car door. Violet was shocked to see Jade and Dario kissing, and her eyes widened visibly. Caroline, on the other hand, maintained her calm demeanor as she observed the show of affection. Dario noticed that they were being watched, released his wife from his embrace and said, Your agent is here to pick you up. Jade was put out to be seen smooching and turned around in a flustered manner just in time to see Violet's widened eyes and mouth. Dario leaned close to her and whispered in a domineering tone, Today, you must remember to think of me 100 times. If you miss even one of those times, then you will have to compensate me. Jade glared at him, and then she pouted and said loudly, Okay, I'll think of you at least 100 times. Don't worry. It might be more, but it won't be less. Then she closed the door and walked towards Caroline's car in a daze. Violet was completely stunned as she watched Jade walk over. She was afraid that Caroline would tell her off again, so she suppressed her excitement and tried to make herself look calmer as she spoke to her friend. Jade, what happened just now? And how did you end up kissing that man yesterday? Didn't you say that you were already married? Could it be that you're having... She began. Violet had been about to ask Jade if she was having an affair, but had decided against it. Jade doesn't seem like the kind of woman to have an affair, she thought. Caroline interrupted her thoughts and explained, That man is her husband. No wonder she refused to kiss Robert Radcliffe yesterday, Violet thought. If that man is her husband, why would she want to kiss anyone else? Oh my goodness, that's her husband? She exclaimed.
Shut up, Violet, Caroline snapped. Anyone could hear you. This isn't some bit of gossip to be spread around. I'm telling these things in confidence. Do you understand?
Caroline asked in a serious voice, looking around as she spoke to make sure that no one was listening. To her relief, there was no one around. Violet nodded vigorously. I know. I would definitely not tell anyone about Jade's husband, she assured her. She felt excited at being entrusted with the secret, and she looked at her friend and employer in disbelief. Jade, was that man just now really your husband? Are you officially married? Jade nodded shyly and answered simply, yes. Violet felt disappointed that such a handsome man was already married and slightly jealous that it was Jade who had his undivided attention. But she was happy for her. Oh my God, Jade, how did you find a rich man who is that handsome and is even willing to act as a body double to kiss you in a film? She asked incredulously. Anyone who could afford an expensive car like that must be rich. But why would he come to the set to act as a double? She wondered. Initially, she had speculated that he must have simply been a body double actor, and she was amazed to discover that he was Jade's husband. It made her believe in true love. Dario waited until they had left to join the crew before he drove away. As long as I can make her happy and help her achieve her dreams, I'll do anything, he thought. I'll do whatever it takes to help her become a famous actress. All I need in return is to know that she belongs to me.